familiar with us, Confirmation is Thomson Reuters' digital audit confirmation platform, helping banks and audit firms move away from manual confirmations to a more secure, efficient electronic process. And if you'd like to learn more, there's a related content section in the On24 console or panel at the bottom of your screen where you can find more materials specifically for banks and for firms. Over the next hour, we're going to cover three main things. First, a quick introduction to the topic and our speakers. Second, a panel discussion where we'll talk through real-world fraud and cyber threats, what's changing and what's working as well. And then we'll finish with a Q&A or question and answer session. I really want to hear from you what is resonating, and we have a short survey at the very end. The speaker's conversation will last for around 40 minutes, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A with you at the end of the session. And I'm very pleased to be joined by three excellent speakers today. We have Ross Widows from BDO Australia. He's a cyber security partner at the firm who works closely with the organisations, with organisations across different industries and sees firsthand how fraud and cyber risks are evolving. Along with Ross, we have Amelia Ching, the founder and CEO of Agilite. Amelia leads a professional training and consulting firm focused on IT-enabled services and technology management. Her firm is an accredited training provider with the Institute of Banking and Finance in Singapore. And she works with banks, universities, and corporations to build capability in areas like cybersecurity, cloud, and technology risk. We're also joined by David Chan, Chief Information Security Officer at Hang Seng, bringing the banking perspective into these conversations and many years of experience in technology risk, internal controls, and regulatory expectations. So thank you, Ross, Amelia, and David, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also a big thank you to our supporting organisations and partners, the Hong Kong Institute of Bankers and the Institute of Singapore Chartered Accountants. A quick note on how the session will run and a bit of housekeeping as well. We're using the On24 platform, and you'll see a Q&A box on your screen. Please feel free to type your questions in there at any time during the session. You don't have to wait until the end. We'll collect them as we go and address as many as we can during the dedicated Q&A session. You can also resize the media player and the slide windows on your screen by dragging the corners and edges. So feel free to adjust the layout in a way that works best for you. We'll also be running a few quick polls throughout the webinar to get a feel for the room. And when a poll does appear, please select the option that best matches your view and click. And by clicking the answer, that should submit your response. If you run into any technical issues such as audio or video dropping in and out, a quick refresh of your browser should typically fix it. If you still experience issues, you can use the chat box or refer to the On24 help widget on the screen for further assistance. And finally, the session is being recorded. A link to the recording will be shared with you after the webinar, so you can revisit the content or you can share it with your colleagues later on. All right. Let's get started. And we'd like to begin with a quick poll to understand what you see as the biggest challenge in combating fraud and cyber threats. You should see the poll question in front of your screen. And the question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge organizations face in combating fraud and cyber threats? The options are lack of awareness, insufficient budget for cybersecurity measures, rapid evolution of technology and attack methods, difficulty in balancing security and operational efficiency, or others. Please take a few seconds to choose the option that best reflects your view and then click the response. Okay, we've got quite a few responses coming through. Give it a couple more seconds. All right. So thanks for that. It's always interesting to see where everyone sees the biggest hurdle. And at the minute, we can see 41% as on the rapid evolution of technology and attack methods followed closely by lack of awareness and training as well. All right. Our first question is for all speakers. And what we're keen to understand is what are the most common types of fraud and cybersecurity threats that accounting firms, banking professionals, and their customers face today. And we often hear about emerging financial frauds, risks in digital banking, and now the impact of AI. So I guess from each of your perspective, what are you seeing most often at the moment, and what's changed over the last few years? Ross, I might start with you on this question, and then we can hear from David and Amelia.
Yeah, thank you. So business email compromise is still quite prevalent here in Australia. So where, I'm sure all aware, but where fraudsters impersonate a key executive or employee into wiring or moving funds around, that's still a bit of an issue. With the AI angle in mind, that's become probably more of an issue now because you can use AI to create more convincing emails to trick people. So that's still an issue here. One of the other areas which is interesting is attacks driven by physical mobile phone SIM swap. So we work with a number of telcos on this, whereby there are a number of gangs that operate here in Australia to try and trigger that SIM swap. It's interesting, and it is literally, I think it's 2 or 3 gangs who constantly operate around the country. But when they are able to trigger a SIM swap, they then are able to get access to potentially a bank account and other types of accounting as well. Other types of accounts as well, and that can be a real issue for people. One other, which is not probably discussed as much, is already exposed credentials that then can be used to carry out a fraud on an organization that is effectively innocent in that process. So somebody's credentials have been exposed, they've used that same email address or passwords for multiple services. The criminals can then go away and expose those services in other industries. That's a challenge not only obviously for the consumer, but for the organization as well, because they may have not been involved in the original exposure. We've seen that a few times in Australia. It's key from an awareness perspective for that business as well, to say, well, we're happy to help you here, but the damage has already been done. What can we do to kind of raise awareness on that? And what can we do to limit the exposure? So they're probably the three main ones that I see purely from a fraud perspective.
No, thank you. That's really helpful context there. And David, from your perspective?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, we have experienced a lot of difficulty in securing the customer end, because often they are really the weakest link, and we've seen a lot of targeted malware on the mobile apps, and usually this is done quite professionally. There's a lot of scams out there in the social media, perpetuating some kind of discount or some kind of deal, right? It starts from the Asia PAC countries, and then it evolves around going to different markets one by one. And I think it's getting harder and harder to differentiate the real identity of the customer, whereas the identity of the fraudsters. Another thing that we're getting emergently hard to deal with is the dawn of AI, because as we all know that as we try to fine tune our systems to be able to detect deepfake, as well as in terms of imaging and voice, we do also see that the technology to replicate a deepfake is getting even harder for the defensive AI to actually differentiate if this is real or fake. So there comes a kind of like a race, right, between the hackers and the defenders. And another point to make is we've gone to a point where with kind of thinking that when you produce a certain image or video, it needs to be authenticated from the start. There needs to be certificate. When you produce a certain image, photo, or any artifact that's digital. So I think that's one of the most common threats that we are facing. Yeah.
So David, I mean, on the offenders and defenders, I mean, who's winning? do you feel at the moment?
Sorry, say that again.
Oh, sorry. Just regards to the offenders and defenders, so those that are trying to perpetrate and those that are trying to defend, cyber attacks and that type of thing. Do you feel like it's balanced out, or do you feel like one is more prevalent, one's sort of taken over a little bit, and the other one has to lift a little?
Yeah, I think it's very easy to create deepfakes, right? So in the sense that it's getting easier and easier, I personally think that it's always that the hackers are kind of like a one step ahead, because they are they're very creative, and it's really mind-boggling how creative they are sometimes. They use the same technology, and sometimes we add controls over controls. May it be MFA, may it be presentation layer, attack detection, but then they still be able to do it because they have schemes, elaborate schemes that fool the customer just to provide everything, right? Just to for example, you have an MFA, but they are still able to fool the customer to provide the MFA password, the OTP password, or whatever. So that kind of thing, right, is really hard to secure, because it's not only about technology, it's about psychology, right? Of the fraudster. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good answer, good response there. And Amelia, what are your sort of the common types of frauds in cybersecurity?
And David has pretty much covered most of it. But I think that the reality on the ground that we need to be aware is our digital footprint is everywhere in the digital space. So all it takes is just a malicious actor wanted to target you. And with that in mind, right, we must also understand in all our cyber defense, human factor is always the most difficult factor to incorporate controls over it. And that's where the hacker exploit the trust, the fear, the ignorance to really launch the attack. So increasingly, let's say, for example, in Singapore, scam is like an everyday affair now, because of fear, because of trust, because of ignorance, and added to that, we are all operating very actively in the digital space. So it become a very common cyber incident you're seeing. And it's a constant tussle, because it's one thing about education, campaign, and all that. It's another thing about practicing what you're already aware. And that is not going to go away, because the frequency of harnessing the digital footprint to launch the attack will always happen at every minute whenever they can. So I'll see that as something very common. In the area of fraud, increasingly because of the ease of technology that you can apply, the social engineering that you can adopt, you'll find that fraudster will come in all ways and means, either colluding with internal actor, internal staff, or creating something that can be easily bought and fool the service provider, like what David talked about, the deepfake, forging of authenticity of the document become a challenge.
Absolutely, definitely. We've got our second sort of question here, which is again for speakers, and it builds on that poll previously. But what are some effective strategies for detecting and preventing fraud? And if you're able to, could you share a case study where your team or one of your clients successfully mitigated a significant cyber threat or fraud incident? And it would be great to hear, what happened, what did you do, and the key lessons that came out of it as well. So, David, I might start with you on this one, and then we can go to Amelia and Ross.
Sure. So, thanks for the question. So I think there's no one single tactic or strategy to mitigate, or it's really about defense in depth, combination of strategies, right? May it be technical, may it be administrative. So, for example, right, when we're battling this, so I think last year or something, there's this huge scam going on in APAC, and there is this targeted. It targeted, I think, Singapore first, and then it came to Hong Kong. there's this massive SMS going on with a link, and people are just clicking on it and installing malware. And so there was a kind of a rush where the customer actually installed malware on the devices, and it kind of got full control of the devices or of the customers, and stole credentials and stuff. So what we really did was, one thing we did was awareness. Of course, we cannot just do this alone, because for the whole citizens, we will need the combination of the government, the unification of the different industries. For example, the telcos, right? They also play a very key part in terms of delivering SMS or whatever telco related messaging to the customers. The whole ecosystem in terms of awareness, the whole industry coming together to have a strong awareness to the customer. The ecosystem, the media, the government will need to play a very key part. Another thing about protecting against this malware, I think, is really a combination of technical controls. So, for example, without going to too technical details, when you install a malware within our within the customer's device, there is this attack known as injection attack, for example, where they can just play around with the controls that we have in the app, and they can try to hack it and try to inject some file into the device. So we call this injection attack, right? A deepfake a video, for example. So if in case this this control has been circumvented, we can still use a kind of layer to look into if this video is really a deepfake. So we also leverage what we call a presentation layer attack, a presentation layer defense, right, to detect deepfakes. So it's really a combination of controls. It's not really the lesson that we learned in the previous is that we try to not only scan for malware on the devices of the customer, but we also try to gain a little bit of user behavior base. If it's really strange, like for example, someone logging in from a different location suddenly. So it's really a combination of controls. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying about psychology, right? And those practical examples are really valuable as well, David. So thanks for that, Amelia.
Yeah, so adding on to what David has shared, right? Way back in 2021, 2022, it all started with OCBC suffering from phishing scam. And what was happening was the OTP was generated outside Singapore telco, and the victim themselves do not even know that their phone has been taken over because of the OTP scam. And what come out from that event, I must say, it was could be reactive, but it was definitely a very significant act that represent the collective or collaboration effort of what I call the private, the public, as well as the individual partnerships initiative. And outcome from that, right? The government started introducing what they call the SMS registrar. The bank started introduce what we call the money log. They also implement having the mobile apps being able to detect if the mobile phone user having their phone infected with malware, they are no longer able to log into the apps. And added to that, we have now the police force co-located with the banks together to try to address scam victims who are stubbornly thinking that they are interfacing with the genuine partners or friends overseas. And basically the police force can now block the victim from doing the transfer of funds. So you can see the whole tactics that are being carried out is very much evolving. But what stands out very clearly is no longer a standalone matter. It's really a cross-agency, cross-ecosystem collaboration. And we'll see a lot more of such things as we go forward, because it is going to be so multi-jurisdiction kind of happening.
Yeah, Amelia, and that incident that you mentioned certainly had ripple effects, not just within Singapore, but also within Asia Pacific, and wouldn't surprise me if we went globally as well in terms of people making sure they mitigate these type of risks going forward. Ross, what are your sort of thoughts around some of the effective strategies for detecting and preventing fraud?
Yeah, look, I agree with what David and Amelia said, and it leads quite nicely into just two little examples that I wanted to share from here in Australia. So here in Australia, if you are here, there are a number of fraud and scams that take place, pretending to be the ATO, pretending to be Border Patrol, and really preying on people's fear of their immigration status or not paying their tax and things like that. What one of our largest telcos has done, and working with one of our largest banks, so Telstra and CBA, Telstra have actually put in a good blocking and filtering mechanism to screen out and filter spam phone calls. So it actually gives you a notification if the phone call coming through is actually unwanted, or it's spam, or it's been tagged as fraud in the past, and that's really helpful. They have then worked with CBA, and there's a Telstra CBA API that was launched a number of years ago, which allows the bank to quickly check via the API if the customer is actually currently on a call during sensitive transactions, large transactions, and things like that. So they can actually raise a red flag if they're not on the call, or it's not aligned to what they would normally be like. So I think those two things, the telcos working together, and with what Amelia said and David said about the broader ecosystem, that's been a really good example here in Australia, and it's allowed fraud. Looking at the most recent results, it's allowed fraud to tail off a little bit. The challenge with that, though, is these organizations have done a great job, but there are a number of smaller organizations who sit underneath who don't have the kind of the funding and the technology prowess to be able to implement these solutions as well. So I think there's a piece in there about how do we help the entire ecosystem, and if this is the way we were going to go, which I think is a great way, how do we make that available to everybody?
No, absolutely, Ross, and it is an ecosystem. It's not just combating fraud alone, and as you mentioned, there's multiple companies working together to achieve the common goal there. So I appreciate that. And we're going to move into our second poll, and you can probably see that on your screen now. So which area do you believe organizations should prioritize to enhance cybersecurity and fraud prevention? And the options are employee education and awareness, investment in advanced technologies, AI, machine learning, regular audits and risk assessments, strengthening policies and compliance measures. So again, please select the option you feel is the most important for your organization. Okay, we're getting a few responses come through. Thanks for sending them through. And also thanks for the acknowledgements. I can see quite a few love hearts and thumbs up and smiling faces. Okay, I think we might have enough where I can... Okay, great. So first one, employee education and awareness stands out at close to 52%, and then followed super close by investment in advanced technologies and strengthening policies and compliance measures as well. So thank you. That gives us a good sense of where you see the greatest need for focus. Moving on to our next question. We've got here, again, the question is for all of you speakers, and within banking especially, we've seen a lot of change in internal controls and regulations over the past 5 years or so. What types of changes have you observed that have really moved the needle in terms of fraud prevention and cybersecurity compliance? And how do you foresee these controls and requirements evolving further over the next few years? So Amelia, again, I might start with you on this one, and then Ross and David, so please feel free to build on that.
Yeah, so leading on to what I shared earlier on, as I said, multi-agency collaboration is the way forward. And with that in mind, we are seeing a lot more encouragement of partnership of multi-agency, from the enforcement agency to the regulator to even the sector-specific association, and of course the banks, the telco, or the supply chain, which supply the activities for the whole ecosystem. Now, in the area of KYC also, we are beginning to realize, as in the past, a lot of KYC could be done through face-to-face, but as what David said, with the non-face-to-face and with the power of deep fake in all aspects, you no longer can just apply what I call the single channel verification. So it's now becoming a norm to apply what I call the multi-channel, independent channel to do verification, verify the authenticity. And in the area of detection, time is essence. When things happen, you need to really act very fast. So in that space, I see that some banks are getting together to create what I call the integrated center in responding to incidents that they detect to be suspicious and all that. So a lot of also AI fraud detection solution, the real-time monitoring to detect and to be able to recover and restore, because business has to go on as per normal. So how do you quickly get your act together to minimize the business disruption and the customer impact? Now, not to mention the most important thing is still human-centered control. So increasingly, people are paying a lot, companies are paying a lot of attention to what I call the behavioral control. Because at the end of the day, human beings is the only factor. You cannot use what I call binary solution. So therefore, behavioral content become very important for you to be able to detect things that go out of norm and be able to act fast and furious. And with the fusion center, be able to come together fast without losing much time. And I mentioned about the whole of country anti-scam program, right? So it's about campaign, it's about giving the tools and being able to quickly implement a measure when you see things are evolving. So it's really very important to act on the run.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's great to see from that sort of practical view and that perspective there. So thanks, Amelia. Ross?
So we here in Australia, we have a number of, like everywhere, we have a number of regulators. Those regulators in recent years have put some quite stringent requirements on organizations to try and, if I talk from a cyber perspective, which will lead into broader fraud. So APRA, the financial regulator, a number of years ago now, released the first standard for information security in organizations. They very recently also released a cyber resilience and kind of incident reporting standard. And that really was looking for regulated entities to prepare for service disruptions by understanding the impact of such disruptions on customers and the wider financial services ecosystem to limit the attack space there. And that's really about strengthening operational risk management, improving business continuity, and enhancing third-party risk, which I think is key in the cyberspace. A lot of attacks now happen at the third party. So organizations really need to understand the maturity of those third parties. And I don't think that is a solution we've solved yet, certainly here in Australia, because we do third-party assessments as a moment in time, and obviously things can change quite quickly. And I don't have the answer to solve that question, but I think the third-party risk is a key one. Many of the other regulators, though, particularly in financial services, also have cybersecurity as part of their enforcement obligations and commitments for the next number of years. So there is a theme coming through that the regulators will no longer accept cyber incidents as just happening, and they will hold the board more accountable for them. We also now, and this is within financial services, but more broadly, we also have a critical infrastructure regulation here in Australia as well. So that's to protect the telcos, the financial services, and kind of water, energy, and things like that. And recently, as last year, we've strengthened started to strengthen our privacy obligations as well to be more in line with stronger requirements like the GDPR. So I think from a reg perspective, there's a lot going on. But I think given the amount of controls that organizations need to demonstrate are in place right now, they sometimes need to be quite deliberate about where they focus their energy on those controls. And I think one of the things we talk to a lot of our clients about is obviously you need to meet the requirements of the regulator. That's very important. But you also need to have a clear understanding of the type of threats you face as a business, the types of organizations or actors who would carry out those threats, how they would go about carrying out those threats, and what controls you have in place to protect yourself. Because I think the days of being able to throw money and have controls across everything are quite limited at the moment. So it's how do how do we be quite deliberate about A, the spend, and B, where the controls are.
Great, thank you. And that gives us a great view of both the reg and the practical side there, Ross. Appreciate that. David?
Yeah, actually just quite a lot of things in my mind, but I just want to structure it a little bit. Completely agree with Amelia and Ross over here. So what I'm really seeing is that because as you know, right, our bank, most of the banks, right, they have got different banking licenses. We've got retail banking, we've got commercial banking, we've got the insurance business, and they're all regulated separately. We've got this securities business, they're being regulated separately as well, and all these different regulators, they start to have one thing in common. One thing that I can see the trend across different banking licenses, across different industries, across different markets, is the need to perform simulated attacks against the bank, against the financial institution. So we all know that the hackers out there have a lot of capabilities, and based on our company's digital footprint, they are able to just look for whatever vulnerabilities, and it's a requirement actually by the regulators to perform something similar. Something similar, and this actually kind of like changes our own internal controls, because we want to build the offensive security capabilities, not only defensive. We have that for many years, the SOC and everything, but in terms of the offensive capabilities, I think we really lack. And not only we lack, but then we sort of are in a state of starting to catch up. For example, I was in this last Saturday. I was in this course where I myself physically attended that course, hands-on hacking on large language models. How do you enumerate the large language models? Find out from the AI what is the true model that you are, and then based on the model, we try to look for vulnerabilities and do some kind of prompt injections, bypassing the filters. I mean, we still don't have a lot of that capabilities or a lot of this kind of talent within our organization, and that's very important as we deploy these new technologies in the form of, I don't know, chatbots or whatever, to our customers, right? Another thing that I'm looking at is, the regulations are really being affected by geopolitics. We've seen, the tariffs, by Trump, and the export control on software. It's obviously he always, to be very honest, he always stops somewhere in between. But then but what I'm trying to say kinds of wakes everyone up that what if these export controls are really going to happen, right? And obviously the main players in technology here are China and the US, and it really shapes the regulations as well. It really shapes how the data residency of our customers' data. Everyone is just really quite afraid that the data will get out of their jurisdiction or things like that. So all these geopolitics, as well as emerging technology, as well as talent and everything, really factors into the changes of the internal controls and regulations.
Yeah, no, you've covered quite a few good points there, David. So no, appreciate that. And we're going to move on to actually our one more poll before we sort of move to the next part of our discussion. So the poll that you can see up on your screen, we have: how confident are you in your organization's current fraud prevention and cybersecurity measures? A, very confident; B, somewhat confident; C, neutral; D, not very confident; and E, not confident at all. So please choose the option that best reflects, and I guess how you feel today. Okay, we're getting some few that have been submitted. Just a couple more seconds. Okay, yeah, thanks for your responses. It's always revealing to see the spread of confidence levels, but certainly interesting to see that most of you have chosen somewhat confident and also neutral, so sort of in the middle there. So no, appreciate your time for answering that particular poll. So Ross, this next question is specifically for you. Across the different client industries that you work with, and what are the most common motives and attack methods that you see? And when you're working with those clients, how do you help them build their defense systems in a way that is both practical and effective so they can protect their businesses without overcomplicating things?
Yeah, look, one of the first things I'll say, and this will build on from some of the points David and Amelia have made, is from an attack and defense perspective, if you put yourself in the shoes of the attacker, they typically have an outcome in mind, and they will just keep trying to get access to an organization for as long as it takes. That's their kind of sole goal in life. If you think about a defender there, you're trying to defend a very vast ecosystem. And if you think about the ecosystems we operate in today, it's typically in other people's environments, cloud environments, third-party environments, contractors, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very difficult to kind of look at that telemetry all the time. So the attacker really only needs to get it right once, whereas the defenders need to get it right 100% of the time. So from the kind of the size of the ecosystem and the psychology point as well, if you've come off a 12-hour shift all day in the SOC, that's a very different proposition to perhaps the attacker. So I think it's a very, very hard role for the cyber teams, currently. In terms of the attack methods, well, there's a number that are very common that we're still seeing in Australia. So we still see ransomware. That's probably evolving now because we typically have our ransomware gangs that we're aware of. They obviously sell their ransomware kits to other people now who aren't as sophisticated, can carry out those attacks as well. And AI is only increasing that. We still see a lot of phishing and social engineering attacks. And again, I mentioned at the top of the meeting that AI is making those, particularly phishing emails, more realistic, and whether that be the actual contents of the email itself, or again, David's point earlier, they're very creative about how they do it. So they may use, Cyrillic in the email, so it looks like a normal character when it's not, and things like that. It's very easy to trick people these days in some of those areas. Insider threat is still a big problem for a lot of organizations as well. We've seen, and with AI, insider threat, interestingly, we've had a number of clients who have had, not necessarily insider threat, but it's led to fraud where employees have been taking data and putting it into large language models for sometimes legitimate reasons, but sometimes nefarious reasons as well. And that's led to a lot of issues for our clients where they've had to perhaps have a notifiable data breach because it's included personally identifiable information and things like that. The other area is, and we touched on this, is the third-party attack. So you may be subject to a cyber attack effectively because your third party has been subject to a cyber attack. They may not be coming after you directly. They may have come after the third party. And that's a real problem for a lot of organizations, particularly the smaller organizations where they rely on those third parties to actually survive and carry out business. And they may not have the level of authority to really go in and audit them or ask them to change control environments and things like that. So we're seeing a lot of those threats come through. In terms of how do we work with our clients to build those systems? Well, to my earlier point, we've started to work with clients really clearly on what are those attackers and how would they attack you? And then to David's point about simulations, we do a lot of red teaming and blue teaming. So red teaming where we are actually attacking the organization without any data, and kind of blue and purple teaming where we're actually working with the organization during an attack to share what we've found. We do a lot of that work to test the existing defenses, and the results of those are really interesting and can help us build new defenses. But that's something you have to do really very regularly. It can't be a one-off kind of yearly or bi-yearly exercise. I understand that obviously there's expense in there and it costs money for people. So we like to be very very deliberate around what are the attacks you face today and how can we help you defend against them. We'll do some testing to see where you are, and we'll help you build secure controls around that. The other area that's interesting for us is lots of organizations from a cyber perspective bought lots of cyber tools over the last let's say 5 or 6 years. A lot of those tools have either become redundant or they've become shelfware. So there's a conversation with a lot of our clients, excuse me, around tool rationalization, both from if you're not using the tool, are you getting the telemetry from somewhere else? There are lots of platforms now that are better than they used to be, particularly from Microsoft, Google, and AWS. So can we help you rationalize into one of those environments? That helps not only from a security perspective, but from a kind of financial operations perspective as well. Rather than spending lots of money on various tools, you can kind of consolidate up. So there's some of the key themes that we are seeing with our clients.
Absolutely. No, thanks for that, Ross. And we'll move on to the next question. I'm actually seeing quite a few Q&A questions coming up from the audience. So thank you very much, and keep putting those questions through, and then we'll pick them up at the end. So I'm just conscious of time as well. So in this case, we'll probably have maybe David answer this. Feel free, Ross and Millie, if you have anything to chip in, feel free to jump in as well. But really, this one brings about, I guess, each of you, of course, have these extensive experience in tech risk, audit, banking, and training. David, from your vantage point, how have you observed fraud and cybersecurity threats evolve over the years? And what are some of the key strategies you've found effective in helping organizations embrace change and I guess adjust to those evolving risks rather than constantly feeling like they're on the back foot?
Yeah, sorry.
There you go.
I've just been thinking, right? I think one of the, as what I talked about just now, is always about defense in depth strategy, right? But I think in terms of mitigating fraud and cybersecurity, I think one thing we really kind of want to look at is situational awareness, in my opinion, because you really need to know the MO, right, of the threat actors. We talk about thinking like the hackers, thinking like the fraudsters. I think that's very important. And we often have a lot of subscription to different companies in getting the threat intel, yeah. But do we really know what's specific to our organization? The threat intel that are really specific to our organization. For example, do we really know what is our attack surface, right? Have we leaked any credentials out there, right? Is there any personal information of our senior execs out there, right? Do we really know what campaign is going on in the social media to target our customers? So I think the whole kind of situational awareness is very important, because when you think about it, the objectives obviously for really hacking and everything is really financial gain, right? Most of the time, right? And then there's espionage, and then there's ideology, hacktivism, and revenge, insider. But we're always almost 99% of the time dealing with financial gain, and the way they do it is really through deception, right? As we all know, phishing in a different kind of way, deep fake and everything. So it's really about not only how we embrace and really beef up our technical controls, but it's also about how we secure the whole supply chain. Ross talked about third parties. I think that's always been a pain point. And what I want to say is that in Hong Kong, especially, with the implementation of the cyber law, which Singapore already has, and other developed countries, I think that's really welcomed kind of a move by the government, because it not only secures us, but it also helps to secure our supply chain, our critical infrastructures, and it brings a sense of awareness to the whole industry that coming together. And I think this one point I want to make is sharing intelligence is very important, because the fraudsters usually come to a market, and when it really works for them, they enter a different market. So if we have some kind of like a traffic light protocol where we can share information that's really relevant, right? Without just sharing for the sake of sharing, but really something that's really we find that it might be helpful to the other organizations. It will be really great. Yeah, so I think one of the key points is besides defense in depth, I think situational awareness is very important. Yeah.
No, thank you, David, and that really sort of highlights how important situational awareness is. In terms of combating fraud. I'm going to move on over to the next question. Amelia, I'm going to ask you to help me answer this question, and feel free to share any thoughts, and perhaps you want me to have maybe something has arose from what David said. But the next question is one many organizations struggle with, right? And it's about, how can organizations effectively balance implementing robust cybersecurity measures while still maintaining efficient business operations and, of course, a strong customer experience. So what have you seen works well in practice to get the balance right, Amelia?
Yeah, so getting the balance right is always a tricky stage, right? So on one hand, that business as usual, business demands certain requirements, but on the other hand, the regulator is telling you that, no, you need to make sure security by design has to be embedded, and you've got to evolve as new regulation come in, you've got to implement. So a lot of time, the organization has to really rationalize by what I call the risk-based approach and see where the business priority and the security can work hand in hand. Now, in my training, many a times I also emphasize a lot about the close working of the 3 lines of defense, because only when you understand the business requirement plus the security that is adopt across the 3 lines of defense, then you know how to prioritize to achieve what I call the optimum outcome. So close working across the 3 lines of defense and understanding the business priority, the risk base that they are focusing on will really help the organization to still be able to grow their business and not compromising on security. One other part that increasingly it is really very important is always staying very close to the latest happening, including like what David mentioned about the cyber law, the introduction of cross-agency collaboration and all that. These are ecosystems that are there to help to bring the security to the front while the business continue to run. And I see this to be continue forward.
Yeah, so it's really good advice there, Amelia. Thank you. And Ross, I guess looking ahead now with the the rapid evolution of technology, what emerging trends in cybersecurity and fraud detection do you think organizations should be preparing for over the next 2 years?
I think everyone in my kind of world is talking about AI at the moment. And I think that's going to be the key thing that we need to think about over the next probably, it changes every 2 months, 1 month at the moment. So I think that's the key thing. I think with AI, from a practical lens, there is a question in my mind around, people are using Microsoft Copilot and other things. Are they seeing business benefits from it yet, outside of some kind of small admin wins? So there's a question there about, have we got to that point where we're practically using AI to move our businesses forward? Some obviously definitely are, but I'm not sure for the bulk of organizations. From a cyber perspective, and David touched on it, there's a piece here about AI-driven defense and offense, and I don't think we're quite there yet, but it'll be interesting to see what happens when AI is really driving offensive attacks, and then we need AI to drive the defensive element as well. There's already AI is obviously built into some of our security tools at the moment, and it can perform some initial triage and things like that. But as that ramps up, that'll be something to really watch. I think the other thing to watch, and it's if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I said it wouldn't have been of interest. But a lot of our clients now are really interested in post-quantum cryptography and what that means for them and how that impacts them. And it's an organization it's a conversation that's really been picking up in the last couple of weeks, particularly around, well, what do we need to do to prepare for this? And if you think about that level of cryptography, particularly in financial services, it's not just data. Everything we do is communication is encrypted. Financial, payments are encrypted. How is that going to impact us, and what do we need to do? And should we start thinking about our asset list now? But also, in over the next couple of years, if I look at some smaller organizations who perhaps again don't have the funding for a lot of this stuff, there's still a lot of basic things that they need to get right as this evolves. A lot of our clients, we talk to them about just getting the foundations right, and the foundations, they often roughly stay the same, but there will be changes in there as well. So how do we help people who are not perhaps a huge bank or a huge telco? How do we help them understand these threats and apply the appropriate controls that they can do within their sphere of influence?
Absolutely. No, thank you very much, Ross. I appreciate that. And we'll make sure we have some time for some audience Q&A. So I guess, would appreciate some very short responses to our final question, which I guess is what advice would you give to businesses that are just starting to invest in cybersecurity and fraud prevention? Particularly the small organizations with limited resources, as Ross pointed out earlier in the session. And I guess on the individual side, which should resonate with all of us, what guidance would you offer to people personally in terms of how they can better protect themselves day by day? David, I can start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of things, right, for smaller organizations, right? Because it's very hard for them to, make these huge investments. But I think one of the key things that they can do is to adopt a kind of a zero trust principle from a start. But because there's just too many loopholes, too many attack surface. Maybe you can start with non-trusting everything first, and then slowly giving access, slowly giving the trust. I think there's a lot of good free tools out there that's helpful. For example, using, I'm not going to quote which brand, but obviously some authenticators, MFA. If you use Google, you use Microsoft, you use any other brands, a lot of them have this MFA capability. And also, device management capabilities. Please make good use of them. A lot of them does not incur a lot of cost. Always, take precautions in patch management and backups, because patch management is something that is the core of technical vulnerabilities, and always be able to restore is always critical, because it's not only, we always talk about it's not about if, it's always about when right now, right? So when something happens, are you to be able to restore backup? And always, right, employee training is very important, because as a small company, I think everyone is the firewall. It's not about the technical firewall, it's the human firewall. As I say, right, leverage open source tools that are really good in terms of providing this capability. Guidance from the government, I think, is very important as well. I think because they have really very robust kind of framework. For example, the HKMA in Hong Kong, right? We have this CRAF, this Auditors has got this S17, and I guess other countries have something similar. Leverage these guidance instead of creating your own policies, which would be very cumbersome and not robust enough, maybe. Yeah. So, yeah.
That makes sense. No, thank you. And Amelia, some quick advice?
I always say that if you do not know what you do not know, everything seems like a breeze. So deepfake is such a big deal. So the only way you can make people sit up and know that it's real is to show them how it happens. And once you show them how it happens, then they realize it is real, right? And once they understand that it's real, it's really about practicing, I call the hygiene factor. Practicing it by having drill every day, by being skepticism, practice skepticism in everything you see. Never trust at first sight, not like love at first sight. And then, of course, like what David said, expect things will happen. You will never be in the situation where it's a perfect marriage. Yeah. So in the same way, resiliency is a must. You need to make sure that you have a way to bounce back and continue your day-to-day operation. It is given. So to me, I will say that understand what are your crown jewels. Make sure you have a means to be able to restore them and resume your business. That will be a very important advice for them.
That's great, Amelia. And that's like the comparison there with the marriage. Ross, some very, very quick advice?
Yeah, look, if I could give 3 pieces of advice to a business, it would be to understand your kind of exposure and weak points, apply the foundational controls you need, such as zero trust, like David mentioned, and stress test yourself and do that regularly.
Excellent. No, great. Perfect. And just going into the Q&A, we've got quite a few actually that's come through. And I'll read out a question and then direct it to one or more of our speakers. The first one that's really popping out to me is, I have a question. Many banking apps now require facial authentication. Is there any risk of being attacked or scammed through this method? So David, what are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I think there's a couple of incidents. I'm going to go code which ones, right? But there's some incidents where the fraudsters are able to bypass the account opening of the banks, some of the virtual banks. Actually, I run a research team in Guangzhou. And they are able to replicate the whole thing for some banks, and the fundamental weakness is related to the injection attack. So if you look at, technically, I'll try to be not as non-technical as possible, but you need to be able to detect your mobile banking app need to be able to detect if the environment it's running on is really hostile. And in order to do that, you would need kind of permissions on the device, as well as some area of capability on your mobile app. But then that capability could be bypassed potentially. And as what I said, there's a deepfake video, and once that control has been bypassed, you're able to, because what happens is usually you get the video feed directly from the camera, but what happens is that the fraudster is able to hijack the API of the device between the camera and the backend server. So the fraudsters were injecting the file directly without from the camera, right? So it's directly injecting a deepfake file, and so that layer needs to be secured. We need to be able to detect if there's any kind of attempts to bypass the camera. A second layer is if indeed that file goes through and the injection attack is successful, we still need a presentation layer behind the scenes to get some kind of probability or a number or percentage if this file is actually a deepfake or a real, right? To be able to flag that anomaly and have a process that triggers a manual kind of review. So I think that combination would be a lot more. You'll be a lot more better positioned, to deploy this kind of solution, yeah.
No, nice one, David. Thank you. And I know we're almost right on time, but I'm going to stretch it a little bit. I've got one more question here. Any security concern when we use ChatGPT with client information? Ross, Amelia, any sort of brief responses to that?
I think my only response would be it would depend firstly on whether ChatGPT is an approved application for the business and what guardrails the business have put around the use of said application. And if it is working within those guardrails. If it's not an approved application, but it's still accessible, then the risk becomes, for me, it's probably less of about losing data because it will go into the kind of ChatGPT's database and how discoverable that be is kind of up for debate. But if personal data is put into that database and it says a significant volume, then you may be, depending on your country of origin, you may have to disclose that to your regulator. That could be a problem for a business.
Great. Amelia, any final thoughts there?
Yeah, my take will be this. ChatGPT is owned by third party. So back to what I said, you're as strong as your weakest link. So once the third party is being hacked, means the data that you put in are at risk. Therefore, always think from that perspective. And before you feed the data into ChatGPT, think about the weakest link that can bring you trouble. So with that in mind, you have to decide.
Excellent. Great responses there. And we're on time, a little bit over, but it's still on time. I'd like to start wrapping up today's session. Firstly, a big thank you to our speakers, Ross, David, and Amelia, for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. Thank you as well to everyone who joined, submitted your questions, and took part in the polls. We really appreciate your time. And before you go, you'll see a short survey pop up on your screen. It would mean a lot to us if you could take a minute or two to complete it. Your feedback helps us improve future webinars and make sure we're covering topics that are most useful to you. And 3 lucky participants who complete the survey will receive a gift as well. So on behalf of Thomson Reuters, thank you again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. And we look forward to seeing you at a future session.